Good morning. We are happy to see you all here today. This is in addition to being a warm day, it's a pretty exciting day for the church. I'm here certainly to welcome you and also to have any announcements. And I think right now I'm going to welcome two people, which is off book. Certainly Wendy, who is here to speak with us today and share some reflections. We're very glad to have you here. And Dory Wolf, who is here, who, as you may recall, used to run everything here, and is now happy to see that a few other people are able to do things. So we weren't sure we were, but it's wonderful to have you here, Dory. Thank you so much for being here. Does anyone have any other announcements? Amber.
During our discussions and fulfilling our vision, Becky had a great idea to help people feel welcome at the church if they are not regular, if they don't come regularly to our service, which is for us to have name tags, so that people who can know who we are, and even if they've been here 4 times, don't have to go, oh, I know you've told me your name. I'm so sorry, I forgot.
Remind me how to spell your name.
Right, exactly. So we have name tags in the back. That will be especially useful. I know I plan on wearing mine during when we all go back after the service. And we're looking for a way to hang them up to keep them at the ready for anyone who wants them. But please feel free to go back and fill one out. And put it on as we go into the back. Becky, anything else or anyone from anything else I should say?
No, thank you for announcing that.
Okay.
I wanted to just say it's a privilege to be able to pull together music for a wonderful theme like this. And we all woke up to, or maybe some of you went to bed with really, terrible news. And the thought that rang out in my mind, and I know somebody else I talked to, is that violence begets violence. We have to stop it. But if that is true, perhaps also love begets love, and nonviolence begets nonviolence. So that's what we're here for today. And on the order of the music, actually, I did a little switching around. The song True Colors is the Prelude. And I just say a thing about that. That came out in the 1980s, right as the AIDS epidemic was really gearing up, and a lot of people were dying. It was before they had some of the therapies that they now have that keep people alive and living full-length lives. And it just took off as something that meant a lot to people, and it became an anthem. But we're also doing, as our anthem, we're doing What a Wonderful World, that was popularized by Louis Armstrong. And we're going to end, the prelude is Rainbow Connection. So a little something for, different moods, including the lighthearted ones, but a lot of rainbows today.
Absolutely.
And speaking of rainbows, Susan Hodges has created the most amazing cake ever. I mean, it is her masterpiece so far. And so at the end of the service, you really need to see this cake. So I think at the end of the service, if we could just go right out as a procession or recession to the parish hall, and look at the cake before we cut it, and be there for the cutting of it as part of the celebration today. But you got to see it.
An ode to the cake.
Yeah. And I guess I want to follow up on what Becky said about, we're going to be praying for peace in a minute as we light the peace candle. And we're going to be praying for the things that make for peace. And one of the things that makes for peace, obviously, is nonviolence. Nonviolence, not only in terms of weapons, but in terms of words. And de-escalation makes for peace, and disarmament makes for peace at all levels. And really what we're doing, what we're celebrating today in terms of respecting other people and offering unconditional love and acceptance and affirmation, that too is one of the things that makes for peace. So we are, many of us carrying, all of us perhaps, carrying the heaviness of the violence that happened yesterday and all the gun violence that has led up to it. Just this is something we can do, what we're doing today. This is meaningful in and of itself. This is just to be here and doing what we're doing today is a step towards peace. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Are there any other announcements? Okay, then we will hear Becky's Prelude.
Thank you, Becky. That was beautiful. Please join me in the blessing and lighting the peace candle. You will find it in your bulletin. In Christ was life, and the life was the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Let us pray really hard for peace and the things that make for peace as we light the peace candle. Today's scripture reading is from Mark, chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. People were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly, I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And he took the children in his arms, he placed his hands on them, and he blessed them. Here ends the reading for today. We will now sing together the hymn, "Oh for a World," which can be found in your blue hymn folder.
Oh, for a
And now you will find in your pew somewhere a pink card, this being pink and this being a card, so it looks like this. Everybody see that? This is the Open and Affirming Covenant of the United Church of Strafford. And for those of you who don't know, this was written after a gazillion drafts by the Fulfilling Our Vision Committee and endorsed by the congregation. And we are now celebrating our really pretty exciting achievement, we think, that we have been able to get this far with this covenant. So if you will please read it with me. Think about the words as you read. Some of the sentences are kind of long and there's lots of commas, but pay attention to those because they're all in there for a reason. Are we ready? Okay. We, the members of the United Church of Strafford, Vermont, regard all people as beloved children of God. We give thanks for the many and diverse gifts of God among us. We declare ourselves to be an open and affirming congregation. We welcome and accept into full participation, membership, and leadership people of every sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, race, ethnicity, faith background, political affiliation, age, marital status and family structure, physical or mental abilities, education, and economic status. We acknowledge with humility that this list is not exhaustive and that the terms are in some cases harmful and devolving social constructs. We honor the worth and dignity of all people. We affirm all relationships founded on the principles of love, justice, the golden rule, and treating others as they wish to be treated. We commit ourselves to integrate the spirit of this covenant into all aspects of our church life. We pledge to work to end oppression, discrimination, and hateful behaviors whenever we encounter them, and guided and empowered by the Holy Spirit to help create the beloved community of God's realm on earth. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Thank you. And now the choir will sing, led by Becky.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Ooh. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world, wonderful world. The colors of the rainbows are pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world, wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh,
So today, we are celebrating becoming a nationally registered open and affirming congregation. And I invite Danette Harris to come forward with the certificate that we will be installing at the back of the sanctuary. There it is. Our congregation, I'm so glad Dory is here, because our congregation took a long road here, and so many steps before, I mean, going way back, led here. But when I came in 2017 to be pastor, I asked why this church was not officially open and affirming. Because we certainly were in spirit. Every week the church bulletin said in its covenant, as it still says on the cover, all are welcome without exception. And that just seemed to suffice until the 2019 annual meeting, when someone proposed that we have a Black Lives Matter sign out front. And we had a consensus that that would be a good thing to do, a good message. But we realized that it was not enough just to say that Black Lives Matter. And it was not enough just to say that all are welcome. We needed to say those things from a place of commitment. We had to be willing to back them up with actions that had the congregation's official support, that we all knew and that everyone would know. So we decided at a circle conversation in January 2020, Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday, we decided to move forward with both anti-racism work and an open and affirming process. And then COVID came. Many months went by. And once we could gather again, we started putting together a series of presentations and discussions. We explored especially issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. We thought carefully about what we could say and commit to do, arriving, as Joey said, after many, many drafts, at the covenant that we just read and that we adopted unanimously at our annual meeting last year. We wanted a process that would model inclusivity, so we're going to see that now. So please stand if you gave a presentation or led a book study. Joey? There are others who are not here. No, keep standing. So please stand if you were on the Fulfilling Our Vision Committee that shepherded the process. Please stand. Please stand if you were part of our anti-racism group, if you ever attended any of the meetings of our anti-racism group. Please stand if you attended any of the open and affirming presentations or book studies, or if you voted to adopt the covenant. Please stand. And now please stand if you support this covenant and its work. All right, thank you all, and applause. So we passed an implementation plan at the same time as the covenant, and it's quite long, but it begins, we commit to seek ways to incorporate the spirit of our open and affirming covenant in our church life, including worship, mission, outreach, advocacy, individual and collective education and reflection, and mindfully crafting our interior and exterior spaces to reflect the covenant. And so we will be doing much more than we already have. The plan states our intention to have our Fulfilling Our Vision Committee continue to lead us and to review our progress at every annual meeting. We want to evaluate and grow. But really, it is up to each of us, really, to make sure that our congregation continues to live up to these ideals. And part of that work is to celebrate it. So we're going to end by hearing excerpts from a letter that does just that.
Thank you. The Mission Committee received in its mailbox mistakenly this letter from a gentleman at Mayfair Heights United Methodist Church. and Mosaic Community Church in Oklahoma City. But I was so pleased to be able to read it and pass it along to the Fulfilling Our Vision Committee, and we thought it was really appropriate to read it today. And I'm going to read the whole thing, because it's really short. It's not too bad. It was dated June 18th, 2024. To the people of the United Church of Strafford, I write to you in celebration of the very important step you've taken as a faith community. Congratulations on becoming an open and affirming congregation. I am affiliated with Mayfair Heights United Methodist Church and Mosaic Community Church, which is a UCC church, two congregations under one roof, sort of like us, in Oklahoma City. We are no strangers to this ministry and know this is something you don't take lightly. For the justice work you have done in the time before this recognition, we rejoice. For your public declaration that your church will follow the mandate to fully love God and fully love all your neighbors, we rejoice. For our LGBTQ+ siblings in and around Strafford, seeking safety and affirmation who may find them with you, we rejoice. You are well aware of the importance of making known the reckless love of God to those told by too many elements of society that they are not of value. Let your local leaders and your community know that when those elements speak hate, they will not have the last word. You are also likely aware of how much work there is to be done. We hold you in prayer. May the Spirit fill you with life and strength to run with perseverance the race that is set before you. A core value shared between the congregations is community. We need each other. None of us is created to make it alone, and we are stronger and better together. You may receive, or have already received, other messages from our congregants as we seek the ties that bind wherever they may be found. We hope you find them to be uplifting and an encouragement for our future journeys, for your future journeys. Finally, we ask that you remember us in your prayers as we continue along our path. With each other's help, the world will again know we are Christians, not by our zeal to exclude or our walls of rules and regulations, but by our love. God sees you, we see you, and I'm sure many more see you as well. The work you do matters. Thank you for your witness, your beautiful community, and for being the living hands and feet of Jesus. Yours in Christ, Eric Brown. Today, we have with us a new friend and neighbor from Norwich, whose life experience has led her to think, feel, and speak deeply about gender identity. Wendy Teller Ellsberg is a mom of 4, a speech-language therapist of 20 years, the wife of a legal aid lawyer, and a self-described, and I quote, cisgender, straight, white woman who is socially marginalized in very few ways. That sounds familiar. The first thing she wants me to tell you about her is that she has no formal education in gender diversity or equity work. However, her work professionally involves thinking a lot about language and human development. And as the parent of an agender, that is genderless, child, she has applied that interest to thinking and speaking publicly about how and why we must all be acknowledged as who we are. She has talked about her own gender learning to local schools, hospitals, and mental health groups, and has helped educate her own kids' schools about gender identity and its connection to emotional wellness. Wendy is just back from a week with her husband's family and a week with her own extended family, and thankfully is joining our family today to continue the relationship building and personal reflecting. Please help me welcome Wendy Teller Ellsberg today.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here today. Hello. Hello, beautiful fellow humans. It's so lovely to see all of you today and anyone watching remotely. I'm so glad to be with you. I'm feeling truly moved and honored to be part of this celebration today. Thank you, Pastor Tom. Thank you, Danette. Thank you, everyone who has welcomed me. And I want to thank Ray Chin also, who suggested that I be invited to speak. I'm quite humbled to speak. I am not a gender non-conforming person. I am a cisgender person, meaning that the sex assigned at birth to me, which was a girl, matches my gender identity, which I've always felt like a girl or a woman. So why am I here speaking about gender identity? I just want to share some of my own experiences raising a child that was assigned a binary gender and sex at birth, and then through our life experience, this child taught us that that was not the case at all, and I have learned so much. It's been hard, wonderful, and an experience I would never trade. So each of you has vast, rich life experiences. I believe, just as you said, Pastor Tom, that the road to peace has so many pieces that we need to put together every day. And I think that just by telling our own stories and listening and putting in the time to hear each other's stories, we build peace and understanding, and we break down fear and ignorance. So I want you to give yourself a mental thanks right now for putting in this time on a beautiful Sunday morning in Vermont to learning together and reflecting on your own experience. I thought I would speak just off the cuff, but then I got nervous late last night and thought, oh no, what if afterwards I regret it and I don't say the things that I really wanted to say, and this is such an amazing opportunity to share time with people. So I did take some notes, but I don't want to only look down and read my paper, so I'll try to strike a balance. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Danette. Yeah, my background is in linguistics, and I'm a speech language therapist at Marion Cross School. Before that, I worked at Dothan Brook Elementary School and the White River School. So I teach children. Children are beautiful, precious souls. I loved the scripture reading today. The light in children is the path to peace and to future harmony. I loved that reading, and it connects to what I want to talk about today, which is how my child shared their own inner light with me and with the world. I just want to say congratulations to your congregation on this fantastic accomplishment and all the work you've put in and will continue to put in. This is a big day, and I'm honored to be part of it. I want to say that not only will this official status as an open and affirming congregation allow everyone to feel welcome, it also obviously enriches the spirits and the wisdom of each of you who is putting in the time to do it. So one of my biggest lessons I've learned as a parent of a non-binary kid is that we don't just do this for the well-being of the non-binary kid. This is something that is a gift to ourselves. This is not an act of charity. It's an act of self-care and self-education as we learn to understand each other, and it's very important. As I talk today, I just have a few hopes. I hope everyone will take care of themselves. If you need to leave, go ahead. If you need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. I'll try not to talk too long. But I welcome your questions. I want you to understand what I'm saying. Just raise your hand if you don't. But I don't want to condescend. I know this is a very well-educated congregation. I don't want to explain things that you already know. So just, help guide me. I want this to be like a conversation. So, and let's all take care of our own emotions, our bodies, our spirits, and see the best in each other. So if we do get into a period of conversation, all thoughts are okay as long as they're spoken in a spirit of love and inquiry. And we can't be afraid to ask hard questions or we won't learn. So here is my story. So I was born in Maryland, and I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I had 2 younger brothers. I always liked being a girl. My mom dressed me in dresses and dressed herself in dresses, and I thought, I feel so nice in dresses, and this is so great, and everyone can see I'm a girl. And I always thought that my gender identity or my sense of self came from the fact that my body was what was called a girl's body. In fact, I don't think I really knew that I had a gender identity per se. That was not a term I was raised with. I mean, raise your hand if when you were young, anyone said to you, you have a gender identity. Right, no one's raising their hand, exactly. So we were just taught that either you're a girl or a boy. My brothers liked wearing their little suits to fancy events and liked playing sports and all that, and I liked playing with dolls, and everything was very, very clear. And I didn't know anything about gender identity, and as I grew into an adult and moved to college, I went to college in Philadelphia, et cetera, I would see people that I now in retrospect know probably had a gender identity that was not cisgender. That is, their gender identity did not necessarily align with the sex and therefore the gender identity that was assigned to them at birth, that everyone told them they would have. And I just found it strange, and I had no education in it, and I didn't know what to make of it. And there are some really uncomfortable assumptions and false narratives that people put out into the world that really marginalize gender nonconforming people. So I just didn't understand when I would see somebody who, for example, appeared to have a man's body but was wearing a dress. I just didn't get it. And I didn't know what to make of it, but I also didn't do anything to learn about it. And I probably never would have, honestly. I think our society is evolving, which is wonderful, and maybe I would have been exposed to this information, but I just want to say that I feel quite humbled that I only have learned a lot about this and become very passionate about it because it's affected my own family so deeply. But I really do think it actually affects all of us. But I didn't really realize that. So I didn't know I had a gender identity. I just thought I had a sex assigned at birth and that I liked being that person, and that was fine. Then my husband and I got married to a wonderful man named Jonathan. My husband, Jonathan, and I had a first child, and we thought of a girl name for this child because the ultrasound said this is going to be a girl. We had a girl. She grew up. She was happy being a girl. Everything was normal, right? Just typical. Then we had a second child, and we saw on the ultrasound this is going to be a girl. We gave the child to be a name, a girl name. We celebrated girlness, blah, 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 and it was wonderful. Then the child was born, and this baby came out, and I looked at this baby, I looked into this baby's eyes, and I could not give this baby the girl name that we had picked. And I remember I was parked at Hanover at the boathouse with the newborn baby in the car seat, and I literally pulled over to look at this baby again because I was dwelling on it. Why can't I give this baby a girl name? And I was just staring into this baby's eyes, and the baby was looking at me, and I was thinking, I just can't do it, this is not the name. So for 10 days, we did not give this baby a name, but my husband came up with this little nickname for the baby, which was Nori. And I thought, oh, that's kind of a nice name. And the thing about the name was that it didn't sound like a girl or a boy to me, it was just like a person named Nori, I don't know why, to me, so culturally. So we picked it, and we told people that we were gonna call the kid the nickname Nori, but we didn't know the kid's real name yet. Well, it's a good thing, because Nori's the perfect name for this kid. Nori was a happy baby, very playful, very connected, very attached. He had a solid, safe upbringing here in Vermont, and everything was fine. But when they became about 3 years old or so, they started to act what we called wiggly. They would get on the couch, I have photographs of this, they would get on our couch and they would just like wiggle all around in this weird way as though there was some weird uncomfortable feeling in their body, and we didn't know what it was. They began to have social problems where they didn't want to be friends with anybody except for children who could not speak. So the first play dates they ever had were children who had, profound developmental disabilities who could not speak, and those were the children those were the only children they wanted to invite over to our house. They had terrible nightmares. Screaming nightmares every night, and they would dream of dying, and they would wake up in the morning, 5, 6 years old, they'd wake up and say, I dreamed I died, and everything was better. And then they would have these hallucinations where they would look up into the sky, and they always felt that there was a message written to them in the clouds that they could almost make out, but not quite, and that the message would contain the answer to what was bothering them, and they did not know what this answer was. We took them to lots of child psychiatrists and psychologists and had them fully assessed. And everyone said, this is a healthy, brilliant, wonderful, sensitive, attached kid. There's nothing wrong. But we knew there was something wrong, but we didn't know what. When they were 7, they wanted to get all their hair cut off, and I liked Nori with their long girl hair, so I was very upset about it and tried to convince them not to do it, but they did it. They were so happy, and I had never seen them so joyful as when they shaved all their hair off. They painted a self-portrait in 3rd grade where half of their head had long hair and half of their head was shaved, but that's not what they really looked like. This was, I think I might be getting the chronology slightly wrong, but at the time that they painted it, they had long hair, but they didn't paint themselves that way. So there were all these things that happened, and we finally, we were wondering, at this point I had learned what a transgender boy was, so I thought, okay, well, are you a boy? So I would say to Nori, are you a boy? I'd say no. And I didn't know there were non-binary people. I'd never heard of a non-binary person, a person whose gender identity is neither a woman or a man, neither a boy or girl. I didn't know that existed, unfortunately. It's a major glaring omission in our society's education of us, because we don't see each other as who we really are. So I could not see my child as who they really were. And I just kept asking them, are you a boy? And what they tell me now, or what they told me in retrospect, once their gender had become clear to them and they could name it, was that they were always having this thought in their head, I know I'm not a girl, so I guess I'm a boy. But I know I'm not a boy, so I guess I'm a girl. And they were just spinning on that, and it was what was making them wiggly. It was driving them nuts. And everyone's talking about, she's so pretty, she's so great, she's so smart, she's so nice. And Nori's going crazy, and it just didn't feel right. But, we were doing our best, and we had this other kid, our older one, who was just perfectly happy. So what was different about the second child? We just didn't know. Finally, thankfully, we sent Nori to a summer camp, Farm and Wilderness summer camp near here, which is pretty ahead of its time in terms of its acceptance and understanding of the diversity of gender in humanity. Diversity, which, by the way, has always existed, but which we have been taught does not exist. And on the first day at summer camp, sleepaway camp, Nori's counselor said, we're going to go around the circle and share the pronoun that we want people to use when they talk about us. And everyone went around the circle, and one person said, I'm so-and-so, I use he, I'm so-and-so, I use she, and someone said, I'm so-and-so, I use they, I would like people to refer to me as they when they talk about me. And Nori, after that, Nori said, I'm Nori, and I use she, because Nori didn't know what to say. And then after that, Nori went up to that person and said, what does that mean, they, as one person? And the person said, well, I'm non-binary. That means my gender identity is not girl or boy, and I don't feel right being called he or she, so I like people to call me they. And this has been in our language forever, and it was erased out of our language intentionally, but actually it's still a gender-neutral pronoun for a singular person. Like when you say, if you go to your doctor, tell them your problems, or if you meet someone, they will give you directions. It happens all the time. So, right, not a big deal. Just like you can be you, or it can be you, it's singular or plural, and we all cope and we use context to figure out what we're talking about. But so Nori had this little education from this person about the pronoun they in the singular, and Nori said, wait, you're not a girl or a boy? And the person said no, and Nori said, well, I'm not either, and I never have been. I'm just a person. And Nori said, the person that Nori was talking to said, oh, well, there's a name for that. It's called agender. A means not, gender means gender. You're agender if you don't have a gender. That's one kind of being non-binary. Other non-binary people might be part girl, part boy, might be a third gender, mostly girl. Lots of ways to be non-binary, not fit into either box. And Nori said, yeah, well, I'm agender. And all of a sudden, Nori started to feel calm and happy. That was that night in the cabin, they did not have any screaming nightmares. It was the first time in years they didn't have screaming nightmares. They knew what they said, that they had a realization right then what those words in the clouds were. Those words in the clouds that they had been trying to make out were, you are just human. You're not a girl or a boy. You are you. You are Nori. Nori realized this, and they had this absolute epiphany of inner peace. The inner peace that I had been wanting them to have for so many years. I would sit by their bed at night when they were crying and having nightmares, and I would say, find your inner light, honey, find your inner light. Go to the inner light, it's in there, you have peace in your heart. And they couldn't find it, and they found that inner light when they figured out who they were. And they suddenly began to make friends, and they actually made friends at camp. And it was the first time they made friends, real friends, who could talk. And those friends called Nori they when they spoke about Nori to other people. Nori and I are going to go play dominoes. They like dominoes, and so do I. So we're going to go over there and play dominoes. Nori was feeling affirmed and seen for the first time as themselves. and learned that the reason they hadn't been able to make friends is because they weren't feeling fully seen. You can't have a friend if you don't feel really seen by your friend. That's what friendship is. It's someone you feel sees you and you see them. So I want to do a little time check just to make sure I'm not going too far over. I want to be mindful of all of your time. Thank you. I'm still feeling so grateful for your time. So Nori had this absolute epiphany and did not write a letter home for 26 days. I got to camp to pick up Nori, and they ran over to me and they said, "Mom, 2 things. I have lots of friends, and I'm non-binary." And I was thinking, honey, you don't have lots of friends. You've never had a friend in your life. You don't make friends. But I was thinking, how lovely that you think you have friends. It was not very, very nice, but they were right. And then I said, "What's non-binary?" And they said, "I'm not a girl or a boy." And I said, "Honey, it's very nice that here at camp you're not a girl or a boy, but in Norwich, everyone's a girl or a boy." And they began to weep, and they ran off into the woods, and I ran in the other direction and sat in the woods and wept, and my heart was just crying for so many reasons. One, I actually knew already that I had just wrecked their coming out to me. I knew in my heart that they were right. I knew that this put all the pieces together, but I did not want to accept it because I was so scared. And I had never heard of a non-binary person, and I thought Nori was the only one in the world. But I did know that this made sense, and it explained so much. And it explained why they had always told me from when they were 3 years old, I want to have children, but I don't want to be a mommy. I'm not going to be a mommy, but I'm going to have children. It was very strange, and I couldn't make any sense of it. That's why I was saying, are you going to be a dad? No, I'm not. So I went back to Nori, and I said, "Nori, I'm sorry. I just need a little time to process this. This is a big adjustment for me. Let me go learn about it." And they said, okay, and we went home in the car, and then I began to read about gender. I went online, and I went to bookstores, and I spent about 3 days not sleeping, crying, learning about gender, and all of a sudden I saw that Judaism, Judaism of antiquity recognizes 8 genders. That the Navajo people have historically celebrated their non-binary people as revered connectors to the world of spirit, and as people who are authorized to administer weddings and funerals. That in the native Filipino language, Tagalog, there are gender-neutral pronouns because there are gender-neutral people. And I learned that our modern traditions have intentionally erased the beautiful diversity of human gender. And that my kid was fine. It was not my kid who had a problem. It was that there were these things that I had never been taught, and so I was putting my kid in a box. And I apologized to Nori. I went through then a big process of grief and also of joy of these 2 tracks at the same time. I cried a lot. I was very socially anxious. I was worried that everyone would reject me and my family, and that they would think that I was crazy or that my kid was crazy. I mourned the vision I had had of my child in a wedding dress, my child as a mother, my child as a grandmother, all these things. I got a therapist. It was very helpful. I learned with the help of my therapist what my own attachments were to how I thought my child would fulfill my image of what was going to make me happy and proud of myself instead of what my child needed for themselves. And I just allowed myself to grieve and to take my time. It took me a little while to start calling Nori they, because it felt very strange and it felt like letting go. But once I did it, it felt so right. And Nori's joy became my compass. Nori felt so happy and Nori was just fine for the first time since they had been 3 years old. They were just themselves. They just wanted to be calm and talk and do activities and be connected and give hugs, and they were very clear. But then came the period of time when the next stage happened, which was that now it was time for us to introduce Nori's gender to the world. And what happened was most people were so accepting, excuse me, so affirming. There was so much love, so much grace, so much interest and open-hearted conversation. All 4 of Nori's grandparents, who had been raised in a completely gender binary world, as I had been, just embraced Nori and began learning and worked hard at it, and were so welcoming. That made a big difference. Our neighbors, our teachers, I don't know if it's okay, but there's one of Nori's teachers in this room, and I don't want to call her out, but I'll say that there are lots of teachers, including one person right here, who just openly said, absolutely, they are welcome, and I understand, and that's great that they are feeling better, and now we know who they are. It was great. People were wonderful. There were also a lot of problems. There were really hard moments that happened, and I took some notes because I wanted to share just a quick list. Pastor Tom, can you give me a time check, please, and just tell me how we are doing?
Yeah, could you never stop?
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try to keep it to like 10 more minutes. Thank you so much. Doesn't hurt for me to take a minute and look at my papers and give us all a minute to think. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to talk briefly about some of the challenges, the frustrations, the heartbreaks that Nori endured, and that I endured, and my husband endured, and Nori's cisgender older sister endured, because we love Nori. And that later our 2 fostered adopted children also endured and continue to see and to recognize. I shouldn't use the word endured, because we've found ourselves to become very resilient, and we are so supported that it's not like we're suffering all the time, but there have been challenges. So I'll just name some of those, because these are areas where we can all do the work to improve our society. So in sports, Nori, there was no place for Nori. Swim team didn't work. Gymnastics didn't work. Everyone tried, but it was all awkward and weird, and what does Nori wear, and where do they change, and what team are they on, and what standards do they have to compete against? And then if they read the news, they see that teams are ostracizing the trans kids, and it was just all very heavy for them. Nori could not hope to stop being usually perceived as either a girl or a boy. So they would walk into most situations making a calculation, do I want to be perceived as a girl or a boy? They could capitalize on this when they wanted to use the boys' bathroom, because the girls' bathroom had a line. But it also became very frustrating. Nori looks very gender neutral, excuse me. Pardon me. Nori has always looked very gender neutral. They really can be mistaken as a boy or a girl. But our community knew them as a girl, and it was very hard for people to change their thinking. And I'll just say here, I know that all of us who want to correctly gender people, we all slip up, and it's very hard. And people often ask me, what's the thing I can do to get it right? Because it's hard to not misgender people. And what I do, what has worked for me is 2 things. One is I practice when the person's not there. I practice talking about them intentionally, using the gender that they have expressed, they've told us that they have, so that I get it right. But the other thing I do that feels more important is I actually look into their eyes and see them as the gender that they have told us is in there, because I do believe that people have souls. And I know that Nori's soul was never a girl. And this is why when I looked into Nori's eyes, I could not give Nori that girl name. And it's just amazing to me that that was clear at 2 days of life. I'm not saying that's always the case. I know there are many people who don't figure out their genders until later in life. That does not invalidate their figuring out their gender. But Nori's story is very nice because it was so obvious to me right from when they were born. So my best tip for you about that is just to think of the person's soul inside their body as having the gender that they tell you is in there. Or you could think of it as their brain or their mind, whatever works for you. But know that the package that a person is in is just the outside. It's just what you see. It's the cover. It's not what's inside them. We're all in our own bodies in here, unseeable, but we have communication and we can tell each other who we are, and it's an absolutely amazing gift. just to continue with a little litany of problems that we saw, healthcare providers ranged from remarkable to really retrograde in their treatment of Nori. We had a gender care specialist who told Nori that there was no point in trying to be non-binary because they would have to choose being a girl or a boy eventually. We had a psychiatrist that we went to when Nori was having a particularly hard time who told Nori, "You transgendered people always want me to call you something different." Another therapist turned to me in front of Nori and asked me, "Why is she afraid of being a girl?" So these are the moments that make me shudder and that scarred Nori, and I don't know if they scarred Nori, maybe that's the wrong term, that accumulated for Nori, that Nori had to scramble up to the top of in order to breathe easily again. Those were the hardest things. Then there were so many good-hearted people, many of whom, we all trip up, and Nori never expected perfection, and no one wants everyone to walk on eggshells. It just makes everything hard. We all just want to be comfortable with each other. But Nori met people all the time who didn't have the knowledge about gender to be able to make Nori basically comfortable. So sometimes people would just share their concerns with me, which I appreciated because I would rather be the one to handle it than have Nori handle it. So sometimes people were very afraid that if their children met a non-binary kid, their children would decide to be non-binary, or their children would decide to be transgender. And my own experience with my 4 children, 3 of whom are cisgender, is that no one can alter any of my kids' gender identities. Nori always says it's a ridiculous kind of double standard to only suspect trans kids of being unsure of their genders, susceptible to suggestion and contagion of gender. Because in fact, anyone brave enough to come out as trans or non-binary is in fact extra sure who they are. Well-intentioned people understandably guessed that Nori was making a choice not to be cisgender. This is another common misconception. So people would say to Nori, "I really respect your choice and I'm going to try to respect it even though I don't really agree with it. It's not what I would choose." So Nori would always say, "No one would ever choose to be trans or non-binary. No one chooses their gender, ever. I'm just who I am." Other people would ask Nori if maybe they were too young to know and if they wanted to just give it a little time to think about it. Very, trying to be respectful, but really felt very condescending to Nori, who was 10 and very petite, very small person. So people would say, "Why don't you give it a few years? Maybe you'll change your mind." And Nori would wisely respond, "Do you ask my sister Anya if she's going to change her mind about her gender?" Mm-hmm. Nori knew that they would never unbe themselves. They could not choose to unbe themselves. And they would say that, "I'm sorry, but I can't stop being myself." People would explain themselves very apologetically to Nori, telling Nori how hard it was for them to use they, them as a singular pronoun for a known person. So people would trip up and say she about Nori in front of Nori and then feel a wave of shame and then ask Nori to exonerate them by having Nori listen to their long speech about, well, it's very hard for me and I went to grammar school and pronouns are very important, grammar, linguistics, etc. And they would say, they would say grammar matters to me and I can't give up grammar. And Nori would wonder, well, what's more important to you, grammar or me? And Nori did come to understand that it's very hard to change language, that it's not always about choosing what's important, it's just hard to change, and Nori gets that. But Nori still finds it hard sometimes to have the daily experience of having people process their own guilt and shame to Nori, right? That's a shame and a guilt that people need to process elsewhere, not to Nori. But there was also so much love and hope and care and learning that emerged, and just people in general were wonderful and were striving and trying. And I was so glad that we were here in Vermont, where there are so many people and so many communities working to affirm and understand gender. So Nori began to do so much better after they became clear about the word for their gender identity. They began to have friends. They're doing great. They turned 17 this weekend. They are they're interested in pre-med. They're at Colorado College this weekend studying anatomy and physiology. They're still facing challenges, like when they first got to the dorm, they put all the girls in one floor, all the boys in one floor, and then Nori was put on a different floor, and for the first night, they were pretty sure they were the only person on that floor, and they were a non-binary, so they just felt very singled out. It turned out there might have been other people on that floor that they didn't know about, but Nori's always attuned to that kind of thing. So they navigate the world through those experiences. But Nori is basically happy, has friends, is secure, is emotionally well. Nori does continue to be misgendered sometimes and is sensitive to it, but it's become less of a sensitive issue for them as they grow into their sense of self. So I consider it a very happy story. What I have begun talking and teaching about this story, and with Nori's full permission, and I'm very proud of Nori for giving me the permission. I want to transition now to giving you all a chance to think and talk. I've talked for a long time, and I thank you so much for your time. So what I was thinking we could do now in the next 10, 15 minutes is two things. One, if we could, I want to give you all a chance to experience being misgendered if you want to, and I'll tell you briefly how this would work. And the reason I want to give you this experience is because if you've never been misgendered before, it's really quite an experience to actually have. You could also choose to go home and do this in the privacy of your own home with 2 family members. But I'm just going to give us a brief amount of time. So what will happen is, if you're interested in having the opportunity to be misgendered, then find 2 other people. Probably helpful if they know who you are, but it's okay if they don't. And you're going to have about a minute or 2 with these 2 other people. And if you want to be misgendered, you tell the people in your group what your gender is, what your actual gender is, and what pronoun feels right to you. So I would say I'm Wendy, and I'm a woman, and I like to be called she. And let's say I were sitting with Tom and Danette. So I would say to them, go ahead and misgender me, please. And Tom would say to Danette, Danette, this is Wendy. He's a lovely man from Norwich. He's a really great dad, super duper brother to his brothers, and such a fine gentleman. And his favorite activity is singing. He also likes swimming. And that would be it. And I would just absorb what that felt like for me. And then maybe have 10 seconds of silence just to think about it. And then anyone else in the group of 3 who wants a chance to be misgendered could say, okay, I'd like a chance. That's how this is going to work. If you don't want to participate, it's fine. If you want to be in a trio but don't want to get misgendered, that's fine. But I thought you might enjoy experiencing it, for yourself. Are there questions about how to do this? So my request is, when your group is finished and everyone who wants to be misgendered has been misgendered, then just sit in silence and reflection, and when the room is quiet, we'll know it's time to move on, and then we'll have a little time of questions and answers, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Please find 2 people if you would like to try being misgendered. Please know you do not have to. If this is just painful and hard, then just don't do it. Just sit in silence if you'd like to just sit in silence. There is no need to participate, and it's also fine too. Just as a reminder, if your group is finished giving everyone a turn to be misgendered who wanted to try it, I'd love to invite us to sit in silence so that we know that everyone is finished when the room is silent. And you could take this moment, whether you were misgendered or not, whether you participated in a group or not, to reflect on how you're feeling right now, and to just give yourself a little bit of self-compassion and self-love for being here, showing up, caring for yourself. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much for engaging to whatever extent felt right to you, and for not engaging to whatever extent felt right for you. That's a heavy activity. I'd like to conclude my time with you by inviting questions, thoughts, comments. I'd love to know how that activity felt to anyone, and or just to hear any questions or comments. You can also ask me anything you want to ask me. If I don't feel comfortable answering, I'll just let you know that. But I'm a relatively open book, and I'm really excited to speak with you all and hear your thoughts and experiences and reflections, even if they're not in agreement with mine.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
A really remarkable story, and from that time of your child's birth and all. Your child is 17 now. What was adolescence like? I speaking for myself, I think of it, how we've had those like rain dumps. That was like how hormones came on for me as an adolescent. I went from like a pretty happy, free 10-year-old to just like suddenly just in the thick of this. How did your family navigate that? How did Nori navigate that?
Thank you. Actually, adolescence has been a breeze for Nori. Yes. Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful. Someone's reading my mind. Thank you. Adolescence has been no problem. There have been so many problems in Nori's life connected to their gender that growing up has not been the hard part. It's the world. It's navigating the world and navigating their feelings. They're a unique person, as we all are, and they're fairly mature. When I learned that in many cultures around the world, non-binary people are honored as having a spiritual role, that made sense to me with regards to Nori, because they're sort of like an old soul. They don't engage in the risk-taking behaviors that are just a normal part of a lot of people's adolescence, and they're doing great. They're just very mature and responsible. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but we were fortunate. Yeah.
So you're a speech and language
Therapist. Yes.
Which, so you're pretty highly trained, and language is like what you do.
Right.
For your training and your work. And so was that, and the language that we're talking about is, the language that you grew up with, the language that kind of we all grew up with. So was that like a help, or was that a hindrance in the story?
Good question. It was a huge help. Kind of like if you have somebody who's sick in your family and you have to navigate the medical system, and you have someone in your family who's a medical practitioner, and you're so glad that your brother is a doctor, because otherwise how would you know how to navigate? Excuse me. My years of professional training as a linguist and speech-language pathologist have been essential. And my high level of communication training has been essential. And I really appreciate how fortunate I am to have had my education, because I've been able to talk with people and understand the concepts underlying all these, these fancy terms. I also have studied a lot of sociolinguistics and cultural linguistics, and I know that language changes and language can change. I just feel fortunate that my training sort of set me up to be able to help Nori and our family navigate these questions. Yeah, thank you. Yes, please. By the way, I should have said, if you'd like to share your name, you're welcome to.
Hi, I'm Tim, and I just want to say thank you very much for sharing this story from a parent's point of view. I've had coworkers, and I work with kids as well, so I've had lots of non-binary kids, so I'm good in the moment for lots of this, but hearing the adult view of it as a parent really helps my understanding. So thank you very much for sharing this story, and thank you, Nori.
Thank you, Tim.
Another, at least in my experience, another part of misgendering is not that it's incorrect, it's also that it reinforces the fact that I am perceived as, like, in my case, male. So it's not just that it's wrong, it's that it says that people still perceive me as male. And I haven't gone through, like, physically changing much about my appearance. Sometimes I'll wear different clothes or something like that. But yeah, that is another part of it.
Could I respond to that, Pastor Tom? Thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely. In a way, I have failed so far, but I'm about to correct this, to state my main point of this whole talk, which you have just brought to light. Through my experiences, I have learned a lot. When I was little, I didn't understand that I had a gender identity. What I've learned through all this is that I do, and that we all have a gender identity, and I call these the two gender truths. One, we all have a gender identity, or a lack thereof, as in Nori's case, but a clear sense of what our gender is and is not. And second gender truth, we all need to be seen in our genders in order to be emotionally well. It hurts us to be seen in a gender that doesn't match who we feel we are, because we do not feel seen. We feel invisible, we feel othered and seen through. And I'm hoping that some of you experienced that when you got an experience of being misgendered or seeing your community members being misgendered. So thank you. It's not that it's incorrect. It doesn't matter that the pronouns themselves are not the thing. And there's so much focus these days on introducing yourself with pronouns. That's fine. It's important. But what people need, I believe, is an education in the why. Why should we be talking about pronouns? It's not because of the language. It's because we have a gender identity and we have a psychological need to be understood as who we are. And that's not something that's special to non-binary or transgender people. That is something that is true of cisgender people as well. It's just cisgender people have this easy pass to being seen as the gender that they feel. I, as a cisgender person, have this get out of jail free card. People look at me and they think woman, and they treat me like a woman. And that feels really comfortable. So to be misgendered for Nori was to be constantly reminded that no one could see them for who they really were. So thank you. That's an excellent point. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Susan. I'm 74 years old. Grew up in an entirely different generation where there were two genders and they were in boxes with hard walls around them. And when I was in my 20s, some of those walls were starting to crumble a little bit. And so for a long time now, I've sort of felt like the male-female genders are sort of more on a continuum, and I'm closer to the middle than to the far end. And nobody ever talked about anything like that ever. And it's obviously more complicated than just a length of male and female at opposite ends. And I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing, and thank Nori for letting you. I learned a lot this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you're not the only person. Often when I give this talk, people bravely, obviously, showing that they feel safe in their communities, are able to just stand up and say, oh, by the way, I've known all my life X, Y, and Z, and this is the first time I'm sharing it. And, we all have a gender identity, and once we have the terms, you don't even need a lot of words. It doesn't take a lot of language. Once we have the basic idea that you get to figure out who you are and share it, it feels good to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I just want to say, again, how grateful I am to all of you for having me. Thank you so much. If you have any follow-up questions for me, please email me. I have an email address that you can use. It's momofajusthuman@gmail.com. Easy to remember. So you can go ahead and use that if you have any questions or need any support. Thank you so much, all of you, for having me this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy. I think we've all had an experience that we will remember for a long time. And we could talk on and on and on. Nobody wants to hear me talk on, and I'm not going to, but it was really wonderful to hear your perspective and to hear about your child and what they have coped with. And I think as a parent of 4 children myself, I often think about, we don't really know what our children are coping with all the time. Sometimes we don't know for a long time later. And even if we aren't in that particular conundrum that you were going through, there are others. And if that can be true, others can be true. And that just seems to me good news for all of us and a good perspective for all of us. So thank you so much.
Let us join our hearts and minds together in a spirit of prayer. O source of light and life and love, you weave together a dazzling diversity and fluidity of forms. You spin out galaxies and stars and planets. You are made visible on earth in the light and life and love within vastly different creatures and things. You give the nonviolent and meek wisdom and strength to overcome empires of selfish violence and greed by bringing light to the shadowed hearts of enemies, by healing divisions with the enlightened vision that all are one, united in and by you as you flow through and all around us. You teach us to expand our love beyond our nation to include all nations, beyond our ethnicity to include all ethnicities, beyond our religion to include all spiritual and ethical traditions, until our love includes all genders, all peoples, all species. You bless all with your gifts of light and life and love, and ask only that we open to those gifts and nurture and serve them. In return, you fill our hearts to overflowing. You give our lives meaning, joy, and love so deep that it drives out fear and overcomes obstacles to oneness and peace. We may not understand who or what you are, and we may have diverse beliefs, but please help us go forth from here as one, each of us in our own way and in our own sphere, liberating, uniting, healing, so that all around us may dwell in your light and life and love. With hearts full of gratitude and hope, we pray. Please remember that we are taking our offering online on the welcome page of our website, or you can send donations into the church by mail. In the sanctuary, you can place your offering in the basket on the table in the back. The offering keeps our doors open and keeps us open and affirming with all that it means to people in the community and beyond. Our offering helps many different people in many different ways, all of them in the spirit of light and life and love. So whatever, whenever, and however you give, thank you for being part of this work. Our next hymn takes, I need to explain it for just a minute. It's in the dark red Pilgrim hymnal, so make sure you get the correct hymnal. It's the dark red one, number 425, Men Whose Boast It Is. So the masculine language may seem like a strange choice for a Sunday when our usual inclusive non-binary language would be most appropriate. But there is a reason I chose this hymn. We can trace a direct line in history from this 1850s abolitionist text through the end of slavery to an African American being elected president. We can trace a direct line from the liberation of people of color to the liberation of women to the liberation of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities to a woman of mixed African and Asian races being elected vice president. This hymn was, in its day, part of the same movement that we have joined with our open and affirming covenant today. Now, there's no question that if James Russell Lowell were alive now, he would have used inclusive, non-binary language, okay? That's who he was, if he was even a he. But I hope that this old language that we're about to sing helps you marvel at how far we have come thanks to the sacrifices of the people who first sang this song and all those after them who have been inspired by the courage and vision and commitment of these words. And the last two verses. Is true freedom but to break fetters for our own dear sake, and with leathern hearts forget that we owe mankind a debt? No. True freedom is to share all the chains our brothers wear, and with heart and hand to be earnest to make others free. They are slaves who fear to speak for the fallen and the weak. They are slaves who will not choose hatred, scoffing, and abuse, rather than in silence shrink from the truth they needs must think. They are slaves who dare not be in the right with two or three. So let us sing together number 425 in the Pilgrim Hymnal.
Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is honorable, if there's any virtue, and if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Practice what you have learned and received and heard from the saints, and seen them do, and be blessed this day and all days by the presence of God peace. Sing along.
Amen. And now please scoot right out to see this cake.